Is limerence rooted in childhood trauma? That's what we're looking at in today's video. First of all, if you don't know what limerence is, I do have some other videos on that subject. I'm going to link to them down below in the description. You'll also see a card for that playlist at the end of this video. But limerence is an obsessive kind of infatuation. It's not love, and it goes beyond lust, but it's tunnel vision for another person often, but not exclusively. It happens as an affair when the person is technically married or with someone else in a relationship, and then they become infatuated and get tunnel vision for someone else. So that's what limerence is. But what is the root cause of it? And then what are the answers for getting over it if you're experiencing that, or your girlfriend or your wife, and you want to save your relationship? Hi, I'm Jeff Campbell from DivorcedParentsClub.com, and I'm glad you're here with me. So first of all, before we get into childhood issues that may or may not be leading to feelings of limerence, what actually is chemically happening in our brains when we're experiencing limerence? First of all, we're experiencing low levels of serotonin. Then we're experiencing elevated levels of dopamine and norepinephrine. I hope I'm saying that right. But these are neurotransmitters in our brain, and they act as messengers between brain cells. And so there is a chemical reaction happening in the brain of the limerent person that is causing them to act this way. They really can't help it because of this, let's call it a chemical imbalance. So the next question people want to know, is limerence a mental illness? And the short answer is no, not really. But there is both a psychological and a neurological component at work here, and they're working kind of in tandem to create these feelings. It's more like an addiction than a mental illness, though. They really are addicted to this other person, and they almost can't help it, just in the same way that an alcoholic almost can't help but to take that next drink. Of course, you can get through limerence, and if you're experiencing that, or your girlfriend or your wife, you can save your relationship. You can survive this, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later in the video. So real quick, before we dive into the childhood component of how limerence is created, if you like this video and you want to see more like it, please hit that like button, then smash that subscribe button and the bell notification button too. That way you get notified of future videos just like this one. And if you have a comment or a question or something you'd like to see in a future video, leave me that in the comments down below. So how does childhood trauma affect limerence? Does childhood trauma create limerence? So first of all, know that limerence is a form of codependence. Codependency, of course, is when two people are drawn together and they kind of need each other to feel whole and complete in an unhealthy way. At the end of the day, you should be happy whether you're with someone or not. You make yourself happy, your partner makes themselves happy, and then when you come together, it's two whole happy people completing each other and enriching each other's lives, but they're not dependent upon the other person to make them happy. That's really what codependence is, and limerence is a form of codependence, but it does have its roots in our childhood, and specifically in childhood trauma. And specifically, we're going to get into attachment styles. I also have another video on attachment styles in case you want to dive deeper into what that is. But essentially, there are three attachment styles. There's anxious, there's avoidant, and then there's secure. And secure, of course, is where we all want to be. Anxious is when you are needy and clingy and you feel uneasy when you're not with your partner or your spouse. Avoidant is when you desperately want love, but you keep everyone at arm's length as a means of protecting your heart. And then secure is when you're confident, you're comfortable, you don't need this other person to feel complete, but you do enjoy and very much love them and want them in your life. So anxious attachment style, that is what the root of limerence is. The person in limerence often has an anxious attachment style, and that is rooted in our childhood. It's rooted specifically in abandonment issues. I'll give you an example. In my life, a lot of people who were important to me, quote unquote, abandoned me at a young age. My mom and dad split up when I was 6 months old. Then when I was 2, my mom remarried and we moved 1,000 miles away from my birth father, and I grew up with my stepfather, ultimately calling him dad. Then when I was 10, my mom divorced him, and for good reason, but divorced him when I was 10, and then a few years later he died. And then a few years after that, my younger brother moved to India for 4 years. And so there are numerous instances in my life where people who were important to me, quote unquote, abandoned me. And I learned to kind of cling tightly to people that I wanted to be in my life, which of course creates an anxious attachment style and ultimately can push people away because they can feel smothered. But that is the scenario that often creates someone who is likely to go through and experience limerence. It is rooted in our childhood, specifically in an anxious attachment style that was born out of childhood abandonment issues. So how do you, or your wife or girlfriend, if that's what the case is, how does someone get over limerence and get back to their primary relationship, and how do we save that relationship? Well, first of all, know that limerence does have a lifespan. It does have an expiration date. It always ends, but it can take upwards of 2 or 3 years in some cases. And so you will want to watch some of my other videos that dive deeper into how to know where the person is on the limerence timeline, because if you're just starting out, it could be a couple of years, and if you're only relatively new in this relationship, you may not have it in you to wait it out and see what happens. Or if it's close to the expiration of the limerence, then definitely wait it out and try and save your relationship. But you won't know where they're at on that timeline unless you watch my other videos. So again, in the description down below, and you'll see a card for it at the end of this video. But find out where they're at on the timeline, but then know that oftentimes the person undergoing limerence does a combination of therapy and then sometimes actually gets prescribed antidepressants, because that is kind of the function of limerence. It does cause that depression when you're not with the other person, the limerent object as they call it. So antidepressants are often prescribed, but ultimately, especially since we're talking about limerence being rooted in childhood trauma, therapy is absolutely needed. So if you're experiencing limerence, you absolutely need to be seeing a therapist. Or if it's your girlfriend or your wife, they absolutely need to be seeing a therapist also. Ultimately, anyone can change their behavior at any time, but they have to take action to actually do so. Otherwise, nothing is likely to change. Anyway, I hope you like this video. Again, leave me a comment down below of what you'd like to see in a future video. But for now, I'll see you in the next video.